Donald Trump's plan for world domination is nearly complete. And yes, I mean that literally. There's a great thread going around showing piece by piece exactly what Donald Trump has done on the world stage. And it would seem all of his efforts are around making the United States the dominant unipolar power. When Donald Trump said he was going to make America great again, it wasn't just about internally. It was also about what was going on around the world. Now, truth be told, I actually don't think this was originally Donald Trump's plan. I think when Trump first got into office, his plan was secure our borders, bolster the American people, boost our manufacturing base, and make our country strong. But he quickly learned something. The United States was being displaced around the world by a rival economic system, something that would shutter the petrodollar. Saudi Arabia had a contract to use the U.S. dollar to sell oil, but they got off that contract. Venezuela seized our oil assets, cutting us off from a major secondary supply. Now, all of this was going on in the last 10 to 15 years, 20 years or so, and it was the dismantling of the United States as the dominant power. The theory is the Democrats fearing Thucydides' trap. If you're not familiar, that's when the dominant power is on decline, it declares war on the ascendant power. The ascendant power, of course, being China or the BRICS nations. The theory is that Democrats and other elites decided they'd offshore their wealth to China and other countries and intentionally nuke the United States so that we would not have a World War III. You see, the liberal economic order, as it's called, was developed after World War II for the explicit purpose of preventing World War III. This system created a series of financial exchanges between countries to lock them into trade and prevent them from going to war with each other. The idea being, if you're in debt to me, but I'm giving you money and propping up development in your country, you're not going to go to war because you don't want to risk the luxury you are being granted. But there were many countries that said no. And over time, it became apparent that this system could not dominate everybody else. It had to bribe them into the fray. And if that was going to be the case, we were going to share power. Tucker Carlson recently had an interview where he said it's time for the U.S. to share power with the rest of the world. And the interview asked, does that include China? He says, yes, because of their scale. Now, that is the new world order system. The U.S. will shrink on the world stage, and we will welcome into the fold China, Russia, Iran, other countries. Likely why Barack Obama tried working these deals with Iran and unfroze money that was sanctioned and taken from them. Donald Trump, on the other hand, says, you know what? We're going to lay down the boot. And we've got a tremendous thread breaking down what is going on. Now, I've been pointing out, since the start of the Iran war, the move against Venezuela was to preempt any oil disruption. That is, we went in, took Maduro out, seized back U.S. oil assets, which were stolen from us by Venezuela, because in the event Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz, Trump wants to make sure the energy keeps flowing. Now, the latest news as we enter day 26 of the Middle Eastern conflict, Tehran says it does not accept the 15-point plan by the U.S. Now, this conflict, it may be controversial and Trump may be stuttering. But the truth is, when you look at the big picture, this is the final move. The reason why this one's so dangerous and so challenging is that this is the strike. This is the final blow. This is Trump's last move before checkmate. Now, a lot of people are saying Israel has forced us into this war. And I do believe it's fair to say that Israel put pressure on the United States. That we know. Marco Rubio said it. Maybe Rubio was wrong. I don't know. Trump denies it, but I think it's fairly true. But Israel's interests are their own. I'm going to lay down for you from this thread showing point by point Trump's world domination plan. And then I'm going to show you some examples. I think this makes it very clear exactly what is going on. And it looks like Trump and the United States are on the verge of a tremendous victory. And I really do mean it. And I'm going to tell you this, too. This is not a statement to say you should support it. The craziest thing to me and the most annoying, I got to be honest, is when I'm like, a thing is happening and people go, you want thing to happen? I'm like, no, it's happening. There is an attempt to create a new world order where the U.S. steps down from its hegemonic role. That's happening. It doesn't mean I'm for or against it. It doesn't matter. It's a thing I'm telling you is happening. Well, all of these diehard Trumpers are like, I can't believe Tim is with Tucker Carlson. Just because I said something was happening, you people are nuts. If you want to get a glimpse at the moves Trump is making, cast aside your assumptions about what needs to be, what should be, and just take a look at what is happening. Tehran says no, but Trump won't back down. And this thread is incredible. It's from 10 Delta on X, not a particularly prominent individual, and it's a cartoon avatar. So I don't know who this person is, but they lay out with expert analysis. Maybe it's AI, maybe it's not, but I look at this and I say, yeah, this lines up with everything we've discussed. When I see people say, oh, we're going to war in Ukraine for Israel because Zelensky's a Jew, I'm like, you made that up. That doesn't align in any way with our attempts at building gas pipelines or dealing with the Russian gas monopoly. But this thread nails it. 10 Delta says, 3 weeks ago, I argued the U.S. goal in Iran is to seize the global oil spigot, Venezuela in January, Iran in February. Neutralize every supply chain outside the dollar system. So within 90 days, achieve a compliant successor government and complete energy dominance. The oil thesis was the obvious layer. However, when you zoom out and view the last 4 years as a single sequence, rather than isolated geopolitical events, the architecture of the grander U.S. plan becomes visible. First was Europe, which laid the groundwork. The Ukraine conflict provided the justification for sanctions that collapsed Russian pipeline gas from 150 billion cubic meters to 40. Then Nord Stream was destroyed, which rewired the entire European energy system permanently. The U.S. went from supplying 28% of Europe's liquid natural gas in 2021 to 58% in 25, exporting a record 111 million MTs, the first country in history to break 100. That is metric tons, I believe. Europe was transformed from a customer with options into a captive market, now purchasing its survival in USD. I also want to point out the Gazprom natural gas monopoly and Burisma and that whole scandal. We know about the Qatar-Turkey pipeline. The U.S. was trying to get its own pipeline from Iraq through Syria, Turkey, and Europe to displace Russia as 20% of natural gas. Second was Syria. The fall of Assad severed the critical node connecting China's Belt and Road Initiative in the Mediterranean. The trilateral railway linking Iran, Iraq, and Syria, designed to bypass Western maritime choke points, was completely destroyed. This isolated Iran geographically and cleared the path for what came next. Third was Venezuela. In January, the U.S. effectively took control of the world's largest heavy crude reserves. The U.S. Gulf Coast has the most advanced refining complex on Earth, specifically built for heavy sour crude. Phillips 66, Valero, and the rest are now positioned to process hundreds of thousands of barrels of Venezuelan crude daily. The U.S. captured a massive strategic reserve and solidified its position as the dominant exporter of refined petroleum products, an industry worth $110 billion in 2025 alone. Venezuela and Iran were two major oil supply channels that existed outside the dollar system. Both produce heavy crude sold primarily to China and evaded U.S. financial supervision, both now being neutralized within 90 days, which leads us to Iran and the Middle East energy shock. Israel struck Iran's South Pars gas field, the world's largest natural gas reservoir. Iran retaliated against Qatar's Ras Laffan, the single largest LNG facility on Earth, responsible for a fifth of global supply. Qatar Energy's own assessment is that 17% of export capacity is gone, and recovery will take up to 5 years. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. European gas prices spiked 70%. Asian spot prices doubled. The only remaining scaled supplier, the United States. If Iran falls and a successor government is installed that the U.S. controls or influences, the Delsey model described weeks ago, then roughly 40 to 45 million barrels per day of global production out of 103 million is effectively under U.S. control. OPEC becomes irrelevant because the U.S. coalition is now the marginal producer. Now add the gas dimension, and it goes beyond oil. The war is solidifying the petrodollar system as it evolves into a hybrid petro-LNG dollar. The old system was built on Saudi crude priced in USD. The new system is built on American crude plus American gas from the Gulf Coast, with no alternative supplier of comparable scale. The dependency is deeper because LNG infrastructure requires long-term contracts and regasification terminals that lock buyers into supply relationships for decades. Europe and the Pacific allies cannot pivot away, as there is nowhere left to pivot to. They're now locked into the U.S. energy system. The market confirms this. DXY went from 96 to 101, gold down around 20% from its January all-time high, Bitcoin down 20% on the year, Brent above 100. European and Asian institutions are liquidating precious metals and crypto to buy dollars because they need dollars to buy the only remaining scaled energy supply. The world is selling its gold to buy American energy in American currency. The dollar is now being weaponized through energy dependence. The structural repricing is happening regardless of how the conflict resolves. But the U.S. grand strategy goes deeper. Artificial intelligence is a physical industry. It runs on power and chips. Data centers require massive uninterrupted baseload electricity, primarily provided by natural gas. Semiconductor fabrication requires helium and rare earths. By choking the Strait of Hormuz and crippling Middle Eastern LNG and helium production, the U.S. is systematically degrading China's ability to power its data centers and fabricate semiconductors at scale. The U.S. is energy self-sufficient, especially with newly captured Venezuelan reserves and expanding Gulf Coast capacity running on domestic gas. On the other hand, China is import dependent, and every jewel it imports effectively now transits choke points the U.S. Navy controls. Iran was the Belt and Road's overland energy bypass, the corridor that allowed China to mitigate the Malacca trap. With Iran neutralized, that corridor is severed. China faces a world where its compute infrastructure competes for scraps on a depleted global LNG market, while American data centers run at full capacity on domestic energy. Russia is next in the sequence. A post-war Iran reopening under U.S. influence competes directly with Russia for the same refineries in China and India at lower cost. Iran's production costs are lower. Russia loses its last structural advantage in heavy crude and its economic lifeline. Additionally, under the Iran war cover, Ukraine has been opportunistically destroying Russian energy infrastructure, and all signs point towards Russia being at the very end of the line. The message from Washington becomes very simple. We dismantled 2 regimes in 3 months. Your economy is about to get crushed. Sign the Ukraine deal. Then Trump sits down with Xi holding every card. Complete energy dominance. The hybrid petro LNG dollar fortified, Iran cleared, Russia cornered, and China facing the Malacca trap fully closed with no remaining energy bypass. Israel and the GCC are absorbing the kinetic cost of a conflict whose primary beneficiary, counter to the mainstream narrative, is actually America first. They put in parentheses. Qatar offline for 5 years, reprices the entire global gas market in favor of U.S. exporters for the remainder of the decade. The Gulf states face years of rebuilding. Europe faces its second energy crisis in 4 years. Sure, the average American might face temporary moderate inflation and higher gas prices. But if you're the architect of the U.S. empire and you view the rise of China and Chinese ASI as an existential winner-takes-all scenario, the collateral damage is acceptable cost. Whoever controls the energy corridors controls the monetary system. Whoever controls the monetary system and the energy supply simultaneously controls the compute infrastructure that determines which civilization builds artificial superintelligence first. The U.S. is seizing all 3. Indeed, my friends, I look at this and I'm just like, wow,